some of the products that you have. I sort of have a lot of different things to talk about, and some of them are clinical updates and resources for you that actually I just find really valuable just for your own stuff that you might want to know about.
I have just the basic stuff. So homeostasis, right? So pressure injury is sort of the only one that don't go through that stage. Inflammatory, and really this is the one that's worth mentioning because if you're called to see this patient, most likely you have a stalled wound, right, in the inflammatory stage. So that's kind of the more important one for us to talk about today. Proliferation, granulation. So that's when your wound looks like a nice, juicy red piece of steak and it's healing, doing all the right things. And then remodeling and maturation. So that's a slow, 2-year process, and of course, protection is really, I think, important during that. And at the end of this, I kind of broke it down to 3 very simple things. The other thing that I kind of wanted to mention to you is scope of practice. So in residential, it's actually not an LPN scope of practice to really develop a plan of care for wound care. We have lots of RNs here, and we're constantly evolving our plan, right? So once we kind of get, it cleaned up the drainage reviews, we'll change our plan. So I would say in residential, I would think that the staff would almost count more on you to write those orders or move that kind of plan forward. You guys get called to see wounds often, is that? Yeah, okay. So that's just something important to think about for these business. So hemostasis, like I said, self-improving. Inflammatory, that's where all the cleanup guys come in and get the wound cleanup free. Granulation. I really love that upper picture because you can kind of see where the wound is sort of like stalled and more pale at the top and where you have this nice flush of capillaries forming for healing. And then remodeling, maturation, closure. So very through healing, right? Product tissue has to remove infection, hemorrhage, pressure, chemical damage, age, medicine. I think probably collectively the group that you work with all have quite a few of these things going on. And nutrition. So I always teach my nurses, I'm like, whatever fancy little bandage you put on, right, doesn't so much matter. I mean, I have the wound care products here, but really, counting on more us optimizing the patient so that we get a better outcome. And nutrition is huge, far more important than whatever you put on it. And of course, looking at your albumin levels. And is it infected? So I sort of like always have these sort of high yield questions, right? So has the drainage amount increased, over the last few days, right? So given that they don't have, a heart failure and lots of drainage in the lower limb or vascular disease or an abdomen ascites, has there been a change there, right? Is it more painful? Warmth around the wound, induration, those kind of things, and or drainage. Sometimes it just presents as sort of this bright orange friable tissue, and the wound kind of looks okay, but it's not really going anywhere, not really healing, and there you might have some more complications that you need to deal with.
Lindsay, what is your period?
Oh,
I didn't understand that.
just redness around the area.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to? Am I gonna get in trouble?
I asked you not to have me, but I really would.
So can you go back to those photographs? Well, maybe not. So I would argue in none of those photographs that we were looking at were those wounds infected. Because I think that peri-wound erythema and the clinical evaluation is what we're really relying on for an infected wound. A lot of those wounds showed evidence of sloughy granulation tissue and that sort of, that one's a little bit macerated at the bottom. So there are things about those wounds that I think won't be ideal, and they probably have a high level of bioburden, and there's probably a bit of biofilm on there, and they are certainly colonized with bacteria. And if you were to take a wound swab of those wounds, I can guarantee you will grow bacteria, but I wouldn't necessarily treat based on that wound swab. I would rely more on a deteriorating clinical picture rather than anything that you see in those photos. Sorry, Lindsay, I'll try
Actually, I think we're bad in the seat. So I'm going to kind of tell you about. Does anyone know what the quick website? No. Yeah. Okay. So this article, there's a provincial wound care group that works together, and basically they're creating a whole bunch of best practice documents for nurses to use. This article, they're just using it actually to update
guidelines. So here, basically there's just been an update, colonization and contamination, basically not impacting the wound, but there's some bacteria hanging around there, and local infection is going deep into the tissues, and this is where we would treat, which is what we were saying. I did the shower thing. So, I come from a world of burns, and we shower all our clients versus using saline to wash the wound. And then also in the foot leg ulcer clinic, again, we would always encourage patients with those slow healing wounds to get in the shower and let the warm soapy water run over it. Now that's not a great idea. So if you're bathing clients, I would get away from that. When it sort of you want to prevent that whole colonization from building up over time, because it's going to take forever, showering regular is fantastic. If you're, if you know there's probably a lot of biofilm or it's like an infected pseudomonas, we will shower the client, get them out, and then put a 20-minute condiment soap on there just to give it another kick, and I'll talk more about that. So biofilms, basically I guess they're saying that they start in the first 48 hours, and of course they're quite smart and they spit out more and attract more bacteria and keep going. So what gets rid of biofilm? Surgical removal, try negative for PCAP, and then the other thing is the 20-minute constant soap, which is another thing that we started using a lot. And if it's, like I'm saying, mature biofilm, I think it's a really, really good option. And I also think first it treats pseudomonas, so you have your choice of vinegar solution, right, or Frontin, which is a cohexing solution. Either or work. Vinegar, the staff would have to mix it up into less than 25% solution. That might be, more barriers to doing it, but. And so here's.
Can you put like biofilm, for instance, compare? Let's say I get asked to see, this one's not even Dr. Becker, what should I do? Do I look for biofilm?
Well, you can't see it. Well, it's kind of like you can't see it, but if it's an old wound, it's there. And especially if it's in like the boxer short region, right? And it's an old wound or on feet, you can guarantee that it's there. If the wound's not doing much, it's probably the reason why. And I think, you'd be safe to be, showering clients and washing wounds well and doing all those things to prevent bacterial growth and taking over, right, to prevent biofilm. But if you get something where somebody maybe hasn't access care or, in the back, sacral ulcers or brain bleeds, right, and it's constantly getting contaminated, and you guarantee it.
Go back to the website you got.
You want me to go back to that slide?
With that surgical removal, I think if it's got an obvious eschar or something, like I would call that surgical, where you actually have to take out the tweezers and the scissors and the knife or whatever it is to get rid of it. But for most biofilm, it's removed just with what I call mechanical debridement in the form of a face cloth. So it doesn't have to necessarily, it's not complex. It's not an operation to do that. But it just needs a little bit of trauma to the base of the wound to get off that top layer of biofilm. As opposed to something that has eschar, something that's really kind of black and dead.
Yeah, near the end I talked about the actual slide, but it's basically like a cleanup job. And this is all discussion now. The plastic surgeons always do this one little routine to clean up their wounds, and it's been doing it for years, and it's super old school, but it works, and it's just moisturizing soaps, right? You put it in there, dries it out, you rip it out, and it's mechanically ripping, the junk with it, and we do it again, and do it again, basically.
The challenge with that, of course, is the frequency of dressing changes that have to be done. So when we're doing those types of dressings, it's a twice daily dressing, which in instances, I think in the instance of where we're referencing today, that's not a realistic expectation to be doing that frequency of dressing change. But we use it in hospital quite a bit for a wound that is heavily colonized with lots of bioburden. We'll often do a wet to dry as a way of trying to clean it up. And we'll do it for 72 hours and then switch to one of the more long-term wound products that Lindsay's going to talk about so that it doesn't have to be changed on as frequent a basis.
Yeah, another sort of cleanup job is samples. We don't really use this very much, but it's an enzymatic debrider, so that's another option. And we use, I guess, in conjunction with a product called hydropheric blue, which is methylene blue, and it pulls up the bacteria and kills it in the home. I'm not sure if this is really common residential or not. It's more of a pricier one. You guys, you have it, yeah. So, Oh, Santo. So Santo actually is something that you would order comes up from pharmacy. It's on the rehab formulary. So, and it's once a day. So, if we would do the wet dry saline soaps, but if you are absolutely limited by, you can only do once a day dressing by availability of care, then this is another option that you can do. Or you can just put plain water on it, even cheaper, just with the Santo one once a day. Yeah. You do. So it's one of those things like Flamazine. So some of the dressings patients have to go and buy themselves, and some of them you would order, and it comes through pharmacy, right, and it's covered on their plan. It actually ends up being cheaper for them, and this is falls under that category. So on the website, I was going to show you that they actually have product information sheets. So when we look at all our wound care products, basically there's a provincial committee, right, through HSSCC, and they picked all the products, and we get discounts on them. And then basically, the provincial wound care group has developed product information sheets that basically just cover absolutely everything on the formulary. So if you see someone else do something in practice and you're curious about learning about it, then I was going to just kind of go through wound care by categories, and I'm not going to go super deep into them, but just some of the considerations for doing your assessments and prescribing. And so skin cares, basically they rate 1, 2, or 3, right? So flap always goes back if you can put it back on, or if there's no flap. And truly the best practice for that is just using a product called Mephitil or a non-adherent, and just kind of leaving it for 7 days. So Mephitil is a silicone non-adherent dressing that helps prevent scar, and it's kind of pricier, and I almost like to use it because the nurses think it's pricier, so they won't change it all the time, and you want it to kind of leave there, right, so that basically the skin can kind of reattach itself. So stopping bleeding, putting the skin flap on if there's a skin flap, and then basically just dressing with a non-adherent. And you can use a local dressing or a wrap if people have really sensitive skin. I'm a big advocate of trying to avoid tape. And then burns. I don't know if you guys see any little minor burns in residential care, but basically for the first 48 hours, we always recommend just using Vaseline and like an adaptic or a Gelinet, non-adherent, till the burn declares itself. And then we're huge users of a dressing called Restore Triac, and that's a silver non-adherent. And you can leave that on for sort of 3 to 5 kind of days. You always want to kind of get it cleaned up, and then before you put something like this on, and getting the dead loose skin so it can't grow bacteria. And then we usually, again, shower between dressing changes and then redress them. And we use Flamazine, I find, for little kids or people maybe who are doing their own wound care at home, or if it's really minor, using a little bit of Flamazine right with Gelinet over it and doing that daily, because it's it doesn't stick, and it's, it feels nice on the burn. So it can be a nice alternative. And plus, I guess cost-wise, if the family has to buy this and you write a prescription for the Flamazine, it ends up being cheaper for your client. So, and the only thing about Flamazine is you would never use it on faces. Yeah.
For those that are trapped, is steri script using packing
So we all have the experience, so you try and suture them and then just tears through because they just have that really fragile skin. So Steri-Script sometimes, but you have to be a little bit careful because then you get traction blisters if you try and use it too much. Like if you're actually putting it across, you can tear more. Dermabond is great as a little trick. And what we do in hospital for the large ones is put a back over top of it. So what it actually then does is use the skin that they've lifted off as a skin graft. And then you put the back right on top, and then it helps to seal and get rid of all the hematoma and stuff underneath. I would also argue for a topical antimicrobial of some sort. So Mepitil, the great advantage is it doesn't stick, but it probably should have some sort of topical antimicrobial because it is an open wound. So I would argue for either some polysporin or something at the time when you're putting the Mepitil on, or one of the silver dressings, because that will provide your topical.
Okay. And venous disease, again, here I think showering, if you can, a client is huge, getting all that drainage off the skin and letting it dry out. Sometimes I'll put Vaseline on the peri wound just to protect it from the drainage, just so the cheek clear. You don't have to scrub it off like Triad. It works really well. And then for compression, so basically this one, I don't know if you're familiar with a Coban 2 Light, that is, they have Coban, which is high compression, like around 30 to 40 milligrams of pressure. This one's about 25. There's the Uniboot, which is sort of 8 to 15. This is sort of like a certification for nurses, so you might have some nurses who are certified in using it. It does an amazing job if you've got that skill set of staff to put it on for you. They're about $25 a box. Again, I don't know who's going to pay for your dressings. The cheap alternative is that you put a antimicrobial dressing on it, put a little local dressing on it, and then use a low compression sock, right? Because if the patients are paying for it, the low compression sock, like an 8 to 15 or a 15 to 20, will kind of do this job, but we can wash it and reuse it, so longevity. That's the option to use, and just, again, safer for the staff. I think tensors are always a bit risky because you never know who's going to crank them on or who's not, and that's where that sock comes in really handy. So arterial disease, basically, are they going to go to vascular surgeon? What's your goal? Are they revascularized? Are we going to break it open and try and heal them up? Or is this more of a palliative situation? And probably most of you guys are familiar with using betadine or inidine and then just protecting those toes. And I guess lots of times they sort of self-amputate. And then just the other bit I just want to say is just huge protection of their feet and pressure offloading. Like order an OT or an air bed if you can get away with ordering. We have these protective ventopedic heel boots that we got the hospital to buy that we wash and reuse for clients. I'm not sure what your availability is, but if you can get away with ordering something like that or get the family to buy them, I think they're like about $80. That a ventopedic boot. Yeah. Yeah, and it just will prevent them from having a few more problems. Maybe I'll just go back. The other thing I just want to say that, if they have heart failure and they have lots of edema in their limb and they have that dry gangrene, sometimes all that fluid and swelling can basically tip it into a transitional gangrene where it looks mottled and it's mushy. If it looks like that, then it actually needs to be treated with antibiotics and maybe debrided and cleaned up, because as soon as there's moisture under there, it has the ability to grow bacteria, and the patient can get a cellulitis and get into trouble quite quickly. So just an FYI. And then diabetic foot ulcers. For the most part, all the clients that I saw in the Foot Lake Ulcer Clinic were all prophylactically on antibiotics when they had an open wound on their foot. And we were very aggressive, I guess, in using antimicrobials, and then, of course, the whole offloading bit and callus reduction. If they cheat and walk on their foot, you can always see the callus there, so they're slow healing, diabetic control. And I don't know, I guess air casts, I think they do them in Clinic 3 here. I don't know where else. If there's OTs in home and residential, that would help you guys get air casts, but certainly important. And then cancers, I feel like I can't touch this one because Morley did it, but basically what I teach nursing, if it's a little open ulcerated kind of cancer and it's in a weird spot that doesn't basically add up to it being pressure, then I would be more suspicious that it might be a cancer. And then pressure injury. So the National Pressure Injury Society basically did an update to pressure injury definition. So it used to be called pressure ulcer, so now it's called injury, and that's basically just because lots of injuries aren't actually open ulcers, so they thought the term was confusing. So stage 1, non-blanchable erythema, just an example. Stage 2 goes into the dermis. And stage 3, we have a product called, do I have have it out here, Triad, which is a cream like full of zinc, and you can put that on stage 1 and stage 2. That's what our ATs always do as sort of a go-to, and leave it, and it works really well. It's cheap, easy for the nurses to put on, so that's probably a recommended treatment for that.
Except the plastic surgeons don't like it very much because it sticks so badly when you debride the wound. It's really hard to evaluate a wound that's had a bunch of triad on it.
Yeah.
So, don't take it personally if one of the plastic surgeon versus.
And there is a product that they use in home community care called C-Cleanse, and it's the only thing that actually gets that triad off. We don't have it in acute care, but those two work well together if they're going to use that. So, no. Stage 3, going down deeper into the tissue. Stage 4, basically probing to bone or any prominence, capsule, tendon. And then basically unstable, where you don't really know what's going on. And this is the one I think they basically inspired them to change. The definition was a deep tissue injury where you kind of have a purpley looking outer skin appearance, and you don't know how deep it is, and sometimes that's due to equipment or whatever, their chair. There's a picture of that. And then I kind of talked about the clinic a little bit. And then this is the Click website. So I wanted to actually show you the site. So there's basically what we call the decision support tools, and that is a library of best practice documents for wound bed prep, Braden scale, pressure injury like shear prevention, treatment, and then they have these. They're epic 25-page documents, but they do have like a guideline summary for a lot of it, and you can kind of get. There's one for skin tears. There's one for pressure injury. There's one for debridement. There's one for maggots. If you ever decide to use maggots on a wound, there's actually a video to show you how to do it and an entire guideline of how to put them on. And then that's what I'm going to show you. And then here is the product information sheet. So again, everything that's on the Island Health formulary for products, if you want to look it up, if you go into here, you can get all the product information, contraindications, all of those kind of things to look up. Okay, now. So here's just an example of one of the decision support tools. Like I said, they are quite long. And here's an example of the guideline summary. And they're fantastic. They kind of give you, a goal if it's a healable wound, non-healable wound, and all the considerations.
Does it recommend products in that flow chart that we have?
It doesn't. I know I was looking at that, and it doesn't. It'll recommend an antimicrobial, and like.
You look at all your
Yeah, but honestly, for your antimicrobials, you're gonna have, I think, Inidine. You're gonna have Restore Triac, and you're gonna have Iodosorb, and you might have Hydrofera, but pretty much this is like $1 a piece. It's super cheap, works great. Yeah, this is, I think, this is about $6 a piece. Like I said, we usually change this one every sort of 3 to 5 days. This one we change about every 3 days, but you won't have a huge lot of choice for antimicrobials, or what's on, I think, according to where you work. But it will, it gives you good thing. So basic clinical evaluations, right? So what stage is in? Like I said, for the most part, you guys are going to see wounds that are inflammatory, how did it start, how old, infected, and then basically just looking at all their other stuff. Edema is always a huge factor in wound healing. So every wound heals faster with compression, and that's kind of why I went on about the low compression sock. Even if somebody doesn't have a lot of edema and you put a low compression sock, you'll get like faster progress on the healing. So that's important to know.
Lindsay,
Yeah.
you're serious? Any wound? Every wound?
Yes. Yes, I am serious.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Even
like
if I can't find
it's
it, I think
underutilized. I mean, the thing is ruling out arterial disease, right? And I feel like older clients probably all have a lot of arterial disease, but if you're using like a low 8 to 15 or the diabetic Sensi foot sock, it does just give it a little bit of extra and helps that wound progress. Do you guys do handheld Doppler? Like for a vascular assessment, what would your access to care be? Are you able to refer into a vascular lab? Yeah. Some of the home and community care centers now have toe pressure machines, and the Foot Leg Ulcer Clinic also has a toe pressure machine. So if you really want to know the arterial status, you can refer them to those places and you can get a value back. And then environmental factors. And for me, when I'm deciding a dressing, I feel like this is like a lot of what I look at more than, you want to put the optimizing medical piece together, but then basically, cognition, appetite, what's the potential for healing, cost of dressings, what is my level of expertise with my care team, how much time do they have to do it, all of those things. So I might go for something that's a little more expensive, but every 3 days if I don't have great accessibility to care. And something that's just easy and straightforward to use. Like example, we used to use a lot of Acticoat, which is a silver, but you could only use it with saline. It stuck, you had to keep it wet. We do the whole saran wrap thing you guys were talking about before. And, you can only use it with sterile water. So I found like people's knowledge around that had to keep moist to keep the silver released and all those little nuances about it, it just didn't happen. So using the Restore Silver was a far better generic option. Are you talking about? There's a Mepilex silver foam. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes drainage gets caught under that, but I think that's a good product too, yeah. If you got access to it, sure. I feel like it's always a running experiment a bit, right? Like, depending on how much drainage the client has, all those kind of things. And then care plan. So sometimes I get called down to the 4th floor to look at a patient with a pressure ulcer, and usually I'll work with the house doctor down there just to make sure, because I feel like the nurses do a little different thing day to day, based on their experience. So there's some really simple core things, right? So always having a PT and an air bed and any offloading stuff, always having a nutritional consult, and then the blood work that the dietitian would like you to order just to do that assessment, and putting on a high protein diet and meal replacements, and then you can order them to shower or do Prontazan soaps or whatever for your bioburden management, quitting smoking, to measure and take pictures weekly. Like some staff might do it, some staff might not. Again, it will just help you get a continuity of care. And then repositioning schedule is huge too. I found, like on my floor, it's almost like automatic, right? Because we work on a floor where we do surgery on pressure injury patients, and we will automatically do offloading airbed. I mean, no one has to say it or write it, but I feel like when you have a mix of less experienced staff or casual staff where everyone's coming in, having it concrete as orders and into a care plan is really important. And then the ideal dressing basically is absorbing. Now, I find that when a wound is infected, right, we'll use a lot of things with a cheap outer dressing, right? And if you order systemic antibiotics, right, when those become effective, the drainage will kick down. That'll be a big sign. And then we'll change our dressing care plan. So, that's one of the things you can always ask the client or the staff if you were giving antibiotics, has the drainage now sort of decreased, and change the care plan to more of a local dressing. So really there's 3 phases, right? So there's the cleanup job, like I talked about, reducing inflammation, mechanical debridement, and again, wet to dry saline soaks, Santal, maggot, sharp debridement, proliferation, basically where you want to just have a really good care plan in place and just enhance the healing and then maintain the bioburden with either like showering, like I said. With the Prontazan, like if you're in a facility where they're bathing people. Sometimes the nurses now use this instead of saline. When you open a bottle of it, it's actually good for 8 weeks. So the saline we have to throw out in 24 hours, so it actually ends up being cheaper in the long run. So we use it in 2 ways. We use it as a wash in lieu of saline just to help control bioburden, and then we also use it for sort of a 10-15 minute soak if we really think there's a mature biofilm there between dressing changes. It's Prontazan. So what it is it's chlorhexidine, and then it has a surfactant that basically helps loosen the adhesion of the biofilm to the wound bed. And when you use it, you don't rinse it off. You just put the dressing on top. Yeah. Yes. Prontazan.
Okay, I have a question. Slop, that's the white tenacious stuff that's stuck on the wound.
The dead stuff.
You try and get it off.
Yes. You have to. Yeah. You kind of got to. If the wound inflammation, I was described as looking dirty, right? It's got, the body's delivering lots of stuff. It's usually kind of watery. You have, dead skin and debris, and of course bacteria. So you want to get that all cleaned up so that you can now get to the healing phase. And until you remove that necrotic tissue or remove all that debris, really it's not going to do much. So you need to do that cleanup job. That's super important. Who can do that?
So the slough will come off with mechanical debridement, with washing, regular washing, with some of the Prontazan. If we don't feel comfortable washing it, we can put the Prontazan on and it'll dissolve it slowly. A wet to dry dressing will do it over a period of 72 hours if changed frequently. So anybody can do that. If it's got a thick eschar where it's black and gangrenous, I think that has to fall into the category of someone who can is allowed to handle a scalpel.
The ET nurses do some of it. Do you guys have ET at all as a resource, an ET nurse in your facility? They do they do some of the scoring for that, but.
In response to the slough question, it is an impediment to migration of keratinocytes. So anything that's a mechanical blockade, and the skin can't migrate across that because it's not alive, so it has to go.
That's what I kind of thought, but I didn't know how to take it off, so I've always just sort of left it. So I should be trying to get like a pink glue, no white stuff.
Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Sorry.
If you've done that, if you've gotten that far, then you've completely won.
Lindsay and I will be out of jobs.
Yeah. Yes. I will
say yes now.
This is on the formulary and it's in stores here, and I can't imagine that you guys don't have access to it there. If you ordered it to your facility, I'm sure would get it, like I said. And I can't not think that you don't have tons of clients with mature. Oh, do you? Okay, yeah.
I've heard some really positive things.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So resources. I think I had a list of just dressings, right? So solutions, saline or Prontazan, non-adherence, your choices Gelinette, Adaptic, or Mepitil. Hemostats, calcium alginate. This is a nice cheap one. Like if you have like a cancer that bleeds a little bit and you're just changing the dressing regular, like for maintenance, you can just put a little piece in this and this will help stop the bleeding. It's just a calcium alginate.
Just a calcium alginate.
It's cheap.
Hemostat.
Yeah. Nurses also use it for wounds with lots of drainage, but it works for that as well. And then Surgicel as well, which is just like a fabric rope with like a cellulose coating that helps with that. And we kind of talked about all of the antimicrobials. Uniboots, they're kind of getting, I think, a little more, I guess, out of vogue because of the tensor wrapping with them, and people are using Coban more, and there's actually a lot of practice support for the Coban wraps. If I put one of these on, I usually would put it on if they had a lot of swelling and change it in 2 days, and then basically as time goes on and the swelling reduces, you can go to every 7 days, with an antimicrobial underneath it. So I would do it start it, check it in 2 days, and then maybe go to twice a week, and then progress to every 7 days or whatever. And then basically a compression dressing will shrink the leg, right? And then you'd want to get them to compression sock to basically maintain that, especially if you've closed a wound. If the swelling comes back, right, it's just going to open up again. So it's really important to protect it and have a compression sock over that. And then we kind of talked about debriding. Hypergranulation, I totally stole this from Dr. Morley. Tobradex, which is so for hypergranulation, you can either use silver nitrate sticks, right, just could basically kill the tissue, or
Tell us
then
what it looks like.
Matchstick. Looks like a matchstick.
No, what does hypergranulation look like? How do I know I need it?
A raspberry. A raspberry that's sort of like an exophytic raspberry that's coming up between the wound margins. The reason it's a problem again is because as the skin is trying to migrate from the side, it can't get there because you've got this robust, really sort of raspberry looking, very friable.
that grows up and sometimes over the
I have
wound
seen
bed edge. Yeah. This is actually. Do you guys know that it's an eye ointment, but it has tobramycin and dexamethasone, so anti-inflammatory and antibiotic, and it's, I feel like you brought over the mainland.
So we use this in pediatric burn dressings when they get hypergranulation underneath the dressing because the silver nitrate stings. So if you're using the silver nitrate sticks, in kids they don't like it very much. So instead we use Tobradex, essentially a topical cortisone, and we put it underneath the dressing, and 72 hours later when we go and change the dressing, it's killed that hypergranulation. So it's a non-painful way of doing it.
And then for burns, our go-to again, Gelonate and Vaseline for the first like 48 hours, and then Flamazine or Restore would sort of be our alternate go-tos depending on what we're doing. And cover dressings, I'd probably, only thing I'm going to say is that we're switching over to this dressing here, Methylex Border. You'll just see that turn over, and it's actually a nice little dressing. It has a soft silicone border so it doesn't pull the skin off every time you take the dressing off. So something like this with an antimicrobial under compression sock would actually be very, very good. And the other thing I was going to sort of mention was stoma powder. One of the other tricks that I've started doing under Vax is using stoma powder. So if I had a pressure ulcer and the person was wearing a brief, or there was like lots of moisture around the skin, this is ground up barrier, so it's almost like cornstarch. So what I would do is I basically put this on the good skin that's now kind of getting macerated around the wound, and then paint it over with a skin prep. So I put it on and basically sort of mess it around, and then paint it over with skin prep, and the adhesives actually will stick to it. But what I've found is that the skin will actually dry up and heal underneath and actually be improved when I changed it next, and it seems to help just deal with some of that moisture. Some people just have really moist skin, especially if they're obese or whatever. It also actually helps the adhesive stick. If you're trying to put a dressing on the back and everything just won't stay on there, it will actually help keep it on there as well. So we'll do two things. So it's actually another good stoma powder, stoma adhesive. It's, I mean, all the places will have it because they'll use it for the ileostomies and colostomies, and it's actually an ET trick that I've stole, but I'm finding many applications for it.
Let me just recap. So that would be for macerated skin around the wound because it happens.
Yeah, we were going to try it under Coban wraps and if pressure injuries, and then we use it under vac drape too when we're backing wounds. I'm going to assume you guys don't use very many vacs because I feel like it's not a supported practice at all, meaning it's not paid for in residential care.
So
No.
I just want to take you back. If I wanted to do some antimicrobial, then you'd say what? And then I'm going to put this on.
Antimicrobial. So
Antimicrobials.
it would be Hydrofera, Restore, or Inidine.
Okay,
I have Iodosorb. I mean, another one that you can use. This one has it's a cadexamer iodine. It has starch molecules, and it goes on brown. And basically, when it works, it turns into like a white paste. So sometimes I find it really good for like diabetic foot ulcers. It's a broad spectrum antimicrobial, so it's really good coverage. So sometimes I'll smear this just on a non-adherent and put that in. It squishes into all the little cracks or whatever. It works quite well. Yeah, it's a good product. Yeah. And you can usually sort of leave this every 3 days or kind of check it till it turns white.
Sorry, I missed that one. Adaptic, this in the wound.
Yeah.
Iodosorb, the classic. And why did you pick this combination? What was special about the wound?
Oh, I'll just put the Iodosorb in, and then the Adaptic is just sort of the layer between the cover dressing.
So
Yeah.
where's the cover dressing? Maybe one of these?
Yeah.
Nice. That's that.
And then these are just, and then they're just resources. Any questions? I'm hoping that you kind of maybe learned something, a new product.
Would you say the Alevine is similar to the Netflix that you're?
Oh, so the leave-in is kind of what we have on current contract, and they're actually discontinuing using the product. I think it's pricey. I think it doesn't stick well, and we're actually rolling into using the Mepilex border. So it's always a soft turnover, right? When your stores is empty, you'll see the new product come into your facility. Yeah.
So what are you recommending in the plastics as in powder? Would it be
Yeah. I feel like actually like a large Mepilex border would be. It's got a nice transfer layer to let moisture out. Depends on how often you're changing it, right? Sometimes I'll use a MePore Pro, which is basically a waterproof MePore, and just use 2 of them to cover it, right? If they have a brief and they're constantly changing that and you want to prevent contamination. Just something basically keep it clean that's waterproof, yeah. Sometimes we've used the large classic pads. It kind of depends again. Yeah, that's true. So
It's really adhesive. Careful on the skin.
Nefix is really, yeah. So maybe put
The word fix, that didn't really like tell you.
skin prepping 2 around just to, again, create that barrier so that you're not ripping it off. Yeah, hi.
Uncommon, I'll get a request from a nurse to do a swab of a wound, and I personally find it's usually colonized by multiple bacteria.
Yeah.
I think it's a complete waste of time.
I feel like you're right.
I have a hard time talking them out of it.
I know. I know in working, I don't know, I know she's going to say something, but I'll just say my part first. In working with Dr. Partlow, one of our ID guys or whatever, I feel like he's always kind of like the swab or whatever. On occasion, I think where something's really not healing. I know we did a VAC Veriflow where we used gentamicin actually as our solution, and where ID was involved, and we actually, saw which antibiotics were effective. But generally, they're all colonized. I mean, if you've got that green drainage and it's a Pseudomonas, sometimes there's particulars that'll spell you off to certain treatments, but pretty much, yeah, just using antimicrobial and good cleaning is the way to go. Okay, go.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, if it changes management, then we're gonna do the test. But if we're not gonna change the management, why do we care what the organisms are? So, because we know that it's gonna be full of organisms. But if we're looking to direct therapy, then yeah, it's nice to know what we're trying to treat. But other than that, just to know that there are bacteria growing on an open wound does not help me at all.
Find them on the site.
Doesn't really make a difference. So I think they've done lots of studies showing that even with MRSA, it doesn't necessarily have a negative impact with regards to wound healing. And I'm not going to put them on antibiotics like clindamycin in order to be able to treat it. I'm going to give them my topical antimicrobials regardless. Most of the topical antimicrobials will treat MRSA and Pseudomonas. So the silver products will have that coverage. So it's not going to change anything. Unless you think it's clinically effective, and that's it.
Anyone else?
Just a question, have you heard of Marathon?
I've not used it, but I just went to this thing in Calgary where there was a huge room of AT nurses, and that definitely came up. And that is, we use Fire's Balsam as like a sticky, like to help stuff stick and skin prep, and I feel like it's in that category, but I haven't used it. Yeah, I feel like it's a type of skin prep, but
There's a question over there. So silver products.
yeah,
So silverine, which is I guess silver sulfur.
Flamazine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of not used anymore. Is that true? If you're using other silver products, or
We use it. Okay, I'm saying this in front of me. When we do a burn, a plastic surgeon will order the dressing. So she might have another thing. But I've kind of seen it used like in kids or where there's simple dressings or they're, like I said, showering at home and just reapplying it, doing some of the wound care themselves. Again, we never use it on the face. It can create a pseudo eschar. I went to the ABA in Las Vegas, and they had some sort of debate about flamazine, and there's real no indications not to use it. Sometimes when you have a really large burn, using these silver dressings can get really pricey, so we might go to flamazine in that case. But for the most part, we are using Restore. Yeah, it's preferred.
It's great for your oven burns, right? So you put making cookies and you get a little burn. It's great because it's easy for the patients to do on their own. It's a simple dressing for them to do. But in a facility, it's at least a once, if not twice daily dressing. So it's relatively nursing intense. And every dressing change for large burns is painful. So we're going to try and minimize that by using a more long-acting silver product. So that's the rationale for trying to move to the 72-hour dressing.
Speaking of 72 hours, we're almost done, but I always get asked, I always get pressure about how often to change the dressing. So if I just had something basic like what you described to me before, something silverish and then something, a nice cover dressing, how often do I have to
Okay, so
change it?
the nurses always ask me this. Like, I'll have a care plan where we're changing it a few times a day. And I was like, Lindsay, how can we change it less, right? So if there's lots of drainage, they have to change it often. I mean, there's no way around that because you want to protect that skin and from getting macerated. And basically, if you're doing the cleanup job still, you're going to be changing it more often. Once you kind of get to the granulating stage and you're sort of, maintaining and controlling the bioburden and using antimicrobial, then I feel like you can go to less often. You can move to your sort of like twice a week, something like that. Yeah.
So how often you change it has a lot to do with two things I heard you say. One was how much stuff's coming out, so you just don't want the wound to get macerated, so you're going to have to change it because it's draining. But then if you want to get all that white stuff out and get it back to pink stuff, you have to change it quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's just the way things go. Okay, but then you can switch back once it looks red, but not too red.
Once you're winning.
There's a lot more of that called AMG gauze packing.
Yeah, actually, I brought a roll of that because I was like, for a wound that's sort of, it won't kill infection, but it helps, like, again, just kind of control bioburden. So for a wound that maybe you don't think is going to heal and you sort of want something that does a bit of the job but is cost effective, this stuff is fantastic. It comes in 4x4s, it comes in a roll. And yeah, we have, I believe I have a little, I have an AMD packing little strip as well. So that's good. I also brought me salt, which is, again, for your cleanup job, can be something that you can use to help draw out infection and get it cleaned up. I don't use it a ton, but it's not a bad product, that's for sure.
Yeah. If you could just give me a quick comment on Intersite, is that one of your
No. So Intersite, if Dr. Morley's slide about not letting it dry out or whatever. So, you're going to look at, again, what's happening, how much drainage is in the wound. If we have tendons that we want to keep viable and alive, we often put Intersite on the back of a non-adherent, right, just to keep it moist. We definitely use it when the wound is dry. Yeah, it just depends. But no, it's still around. Yeah.
So can you share this presentation? Because I saw lots of people
I
saying
sent it to, yes, I sent it to Jessica in a PDF, and you're all welcome to it if you want. Yeah, for
Can
sure.
people give you an email address and you can send it to them? Can you get out a piece of paper and put it at the front? So I need everyone to fill out your evaluation so we know how to do this better next time. So take a moment and take your pen after you give Lindsay a round of applause.
Thank you.